Hello, everyone. I'm David Reed Brown. I hope that this finds you, those you love, and your congregation healthy and well, that life is meaningful, and even perhaps finding some joy in the midst of these very challenging times. Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, 28, 29, a verse that I've loved since I was a teenager. Come to me, all you who are burdened and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. I'm coming to you from at the end of 2 weeks of quarantine. That's why you see some red here, and I'm at a cabin that we have up in Maine. And I'm here from quarantine because I was at the Commitment March, Get Your Knee Off Our Necks in Washington, D.C., because I have such a strong desire in my heart that God's love is for all people, and God calls us to be together no matter who we are or how God made us. So that's why my head is kind of sunburned this morning. I got a little too much as I was working outside today. You will be seeing a video that follows of my preaching. In my last church, we were so busy hurrying a merger that had to happen a few months sooner than we expected because of COVID-19. And during that time, we didn't think to record any of my sermons on Zoom. So what I have for you is actually a eulogy that I did for a dear friend of mine named Robert Parker. And Robert was a church musician. And more than that, he was a composer of sacred music and music for theater. The kind that can be done in congregations and at schools to make that classical, beautiful, holy sound possible and doable for local communities. Robert was also a magician at a place that we both hold dear to our hearts called the Magic and Mystery School in Las Vegas, Nevada, where actually a number of clergy of many kinds and people of many different professions and artists, doctors and pastoral counselors and professors, all kinds of folk, really, that bring the art of magic to a higher level. I use it as a form of parable. And so Robert was a magician also, an amateur magician. We had that in common, and we were close. So his wife Karen asked me to provide the eulogy. It is for an academic community and an interfaith audience and people of faith and no faith. So it is very different sounding than what you might hear me do if it were in a church. So I use language that is more accessible to all people, although I still provide a Christian witness. Karen, his widow, chose 1 Corinthians 13 as a theme for the event that we had on Zoom for 3 hours. So Robert was also from a preparatory school where he taught, and that's an academic community, and so he was such an amazing person. It's longer than a sermon would be. And so I just want you to know these things. At the very end, I try to help us do two things. Two qualities of a funeral are name the person and then give them to God. And for the giving them to God part, I did a piece of sacred magic. We call it sacerdotal magic. And all that means is I'm using the art of magic like a parable. And it was to help us let go, name Robert and let him go. And you'll see yellow roses, and he and his wife, Karen, would give one another yellow roses. So that is at the end of that time. So just please know my usual preaching time is between 15 and 20 minutes, more direct and to the point. And then there is a benediction at the end for you to see. Also on this webpage, there are other items. There are copies of newsletters and orders of worship, Zoom worship, some PowerPoint presentations I did for a youth Sunday. We did a camp Sunday a couple falls ago for you to see. Of course, the magic is part of my ministry to children and teenagers, especially reaches junior high very, very well. And I use it in worship as a communication tool. So you'll see an example of that. And so I invite you to look at these things below. and hope that they touch your heart. And if you're interested, please be in touch. God bless you. Bye bye.
Robert engaged the sacred in many different ways. And so we're going to enter in a special time together. And in our tradition, we would call it a sacred time. And all that sacred means, whether you're a person of faith or no faith, belief, no belief, however it is you engage life, sacred simply means set apart. And that we've already had a very special time that's set apart. Just know that this is a place right now that is especially full of light, and it is safe. In this time, you are free to feel what you need to feel, to get in touch with those deepest feelings that you love most about Robert. However, his life and the loss of his life has affected you. You are free to feel that right now because you are among people who loved him and who care for one another. Karen, you and Robert tapped into an eternal kind of love and you just gave it back to the world over and over and over again, like Paul with that jar. A kind of compassionate, empathetic, strong, insightful, just, all welcoming, non judgmental, wonderfully insightful, wise, hilarious, grace filled love to the world. And you did it again and again. And you shared that courageous love. A special video that I saw. We haven't showed it yet this evening, but it was a video that you did at Prep in order to speak out against Prop 8 back in the presidential election in 2008 to show that their love is for everyone, that it is God given. And you used a very famous passage of scripture from 1 Corinthians 13 called the love chapter. Many of you probably have heard it at weddings. It's chosen often. Love is patient and kind. It's not envious, boastful, or arrogant, or rude. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And you shared that very courageously. What a lot of people don't know is that letter, it wasn't written to people who were getting married. It was written to a very divided community. People who were angry and quarreling and hurtful and divisive in a faith community in Corinth, Greece. And they needed reminding about what love really is. And what a wonderful example the two of you had, even in these contentious days in our country and in our world, just this continuing, wonderful, sweet, and strong love that the two of you brought to the world, even in the midst of Robert's illness. That passage says that if we don't have love, we're a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. We can have all the knowledge in the world or all the spiritual gifts, but if we don't have love, we're nothing, like a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Can have spiritual gifts, can have philosophical gifts, but if we don't have love, it's nothing. And if we don't put away childish things, we're ignorant. And so we cherish what's hard to do, but so good to love one another. And your love for Robert never failed, Karen. You were so faithful and good to him through thick and thin. Yes, there might have been a time or two he called you Nurse Ratched. I'm not sure. But for you, he was always not just your husband, but your hugs man that Karen would often put up on Facebook, Hugsman. The one that you cherished quiet time with in the garden, that you shared sushi and oolong tea and those beautiful yellow roses that you would give one another. The love you shared enabled each of you to produce wonderful friendships and students and family and musicians and actors and magicians. You supported and enabled, encouraged Robert's music and your acting, your voiceover work. You were a team. And the production of the art that the two of you birthed into the world was very fine. For Robert, classical music, sacred music, music for theater, It's very fine, as we've heard this evening. It's the kind of music that lasts a very long time. We have the love and the wonder of God, the love and life present in both your art. And I think we can all testify that this is the kind of art that lasts hundreds of years. The piece that I'm going to share with you in a few moments of Robert's has the words of the Dominican philosopher, theologian, St. Thomas Aquinas. They're over 700 years old, and they're perfectly set in Robert's music. Your love is going to be teaching us for the rest of our lives and humanity long after we've all passed on to the great concert hall of eternity. So, Dr. Death, what lesson do you have for us this evening? Good teacher. Yeah, many of you might not know Dr. Death was his over-the-top flamboyant organist character, but it was his take on Virgil Fox, who performed with capes and rhinestones and played organ for a psychedelic crowd with lights above, behind, even underneath the organ, so that it would be really exciting and people could see the feet going. It was to make Bach exciting and accessible to weirdo hippies. And that's the approach that Robert had to his music. If you go on his website now and you look at the catalog, you'll see them describe their approach as being able to create music with that classical sound, but you didn't have to have massive, unachievable talent. You could have excellent talent, really good talent, or a mix of students. And maybe you couldn't afford to have many pieces of an orchestra, but he wrote music that made classical music enjoyable and accessible for so many. And that whole catalog is a great gift to all of us and that we can cherish for a long time. Dr. Death, what are you teaching us now? Robert was born in Pasadena, California on August 13th, 1960, as he loved to say, 1 year to the day before the Berlin Wall went up. Born to you, Bill, Dad, a philosopher teacher, and Mom, Joyce, an elementary educator for 43 years. Scott, younger brother, you were 8 years younger. And when the family was bringing you home from the hospital, there was 8-year-old Robert who looked over at you and said, "Just think, 9 months ago, that was just a blob of cells." And Scott, you have such undying love for Robert, who you said was always your staunch supporter and advocate. And once the years between you didn't matter. When you were grown older, you were able to have so much fun cooking and hanging out, playing the pipes together, the bagpipes, an instrument that's meant to be heard from afar. And Robert would play flamboyant percussion, twirling the feathers, feather dusters, as he said. And Scott, Robert's talent and passion for music just blew you away, especially his Mass for Peace. I asked you, family, what's the essence that you want everyone to know about Robert? And I think it's so many things that we've shared this evening, that he was intelligent and funny, compassionate with his students, very much a person in his head, fascinated by, and also at the same time, good at some physical things, dexterity in playing the organ, loved Kudo Japanese archery. We saw a photo of that. Fascinated with Japanese culture and food. And Karen, in 1988, you all heard that there was going to be a music trip over to Japan, and Robert knew the Yale band was going, and he jokingly asked if anyone needed a percussionist, and then you asked if they needed a rotary, and they said yes. And you got to go, and that's been a wonderful joy of your relationship ever since. In fact, it's one of the great memories of mine that I had with all of you when Luna Shimada, one of the great magicians of the world, took us for real authentic Japanese in Las Vegas. And it was a night that I'll always remember. Sushi and Pharaoh shuffles. We were in heaven. And Robert loved fine things. He was an Epicurean, and he didn't tend to put good things off. He served ceremonial matcha, powdered green tea in the mornings, and he would basically get what he really wanted. And just, you probably were all aware of this, but it could make buying things, presents for Robert's, a bit of a challenge. As a boy, he was full of surprises, loved anything Egyptian, carried the golden book of anatomy everywhere, loved anatomy until his first semester of college, when he realized that pre-med was definitely not for him. It seemed at times like he could live in another dimension that was often very irreverent and then many times deeply spiritual. Um, One of you said he never quite had his feet on the ground, but he learned. He never wanted to play outside a whole lot when he could be inside and listen to music or read like Tolkien. But Dad, when you went off to graduate school in midlife, it was Robert who repaired the air conditioners in the car, built cabinetry, furniture, took care of the house. And Dad, you asked him how he did that. And Robert's reply, he said, I just think like the machine. That's so cool. Robert's music began early on Sunday mornings. I mean, he's barely able to walk, talk, and watch TV. Okay, so we're talking like two. Sunday morning, he's fascinated watching the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And there was something about that organ that intrigued him. With his first set of blocks, when he was 2 years old, he shaped them into a keyboard. Isn't that amazing? When he was 3, he'd sit on the wingback chair, turn around to the back, upholstered, and he'd push the buttons in the back of the chair like they were the registers on an organ. When you bought him a tortoise at age 4, he immediately played Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and that was the tortoise's welcome music. Age 5, you come home from a Scottish concert, having Robert came along, he immediately sat down at the piano and started to play Scotland the Brave, complete with drone sounds and melody, and you never saw him or heard him play the piano before. So yeah, 5-year-old Robert got to take piano lessons. Bought that organ at age 12. Became church musician in the 7th grade, saved all of his money for that wonderful organ, that Allen. His first job was Little Science of Mind Church at the YMCA. Played commencements at Prep for the next 4 decades until he retired in 2012. Robert gave the inaugural performance in 1972 or 73. He loved modern sacred music so much. Modern sacred music with a classical sound, like Fred Pratt Green's a wordsmith. Let every instrument be tuned for praise. Let all rejoice who have a voice to raise. And may God give us faith to sing always. Hallelujah. And then he arrived at Yale first, I believe, and along came you, Karen, from Shreveport, Louisiana. And it was the only school that either of you applied to, Yale. And Karen, you met Robert and the Yale Percussion Marching Band, and you reminded us to take the word precision lightly, precision marching band, to take precision lightly, because it was less about music and a lot more about the announcer reading a funny script and you all forming something extremely sophomoric and having a delightful time. But even then, Robert was a multi-instrumentalist, played classical percussion, the drum set, brass, and even some piano. One day, Karen, you come into the writer's room, and there was this ectomorph sitting upon the cabinet in yoga position. Both knees are over each other, feet under the hips. It makes me really kind of hurt just thinking about it. But Karen, your first thought was, that's my sit. And here was that person doing that. And you thought, now people are going to think that I'm imitating him. And later, after your relationship got going, you said it was like you met in the forelife, not in the afterlife, but you kind of, it seemed like you spiritually knew each other before you even met. And I think we can all attest to that. With magic, he was never a professional magician, but he had a professional level's interest and intellect. He was fascinated by the philosophy, execution, refinement of it. It's why he came to study with people like the founders of our school, Jeff McBride and Eugene Berger. At the Magic Castle in Hollywood, he served on committees like the Technology Communication Committee, the Audition Committee. But his heart and tribe was the Magic and Mystery School in Las Vegas. His talks clearly show him as a teacher, an intellectual force, a wit, and we'll hear a portion in a little while. In performance, Robert was drawn to the really big and flashy, obviously, but he didn't have room to store all that stuff, so for him, things had to pack flat. one time coming home from Magic and Meaning, he sat next to a woman on the plane, began talking with her, and her husband had died. And she began asking him about his interest in music. And it turned out it was the widow of the very famous composer, Jerry Goldsmith, who wrote the soundtracks for the first Star Wars film, Mulan, LA Confidential, Poltergeist, Chinatown Pattern. And did Robert hum a tune? No. He reached out into the air and he produced a rainbow streamer right in front of her. Some hope and some color. And he said, now it's time for you to make your own magic. That's very meaningful. And then Robert grew sick. And the hardest thing was losing the ability to play the pedals of the organ. And eventually he didn't have the core strength to sit on the bench anymore. And that ability to play that marvelous instrument left him, and that was that. And some years into the MS, I asked, we sort of bonded over suffering in different ways, and we grew closer, and I would push him, and we'd go to lunch. And one time I asked him, I said, so Robert, what do you think of all this? And he said, some days I think it's just so stupid. And there were days when Robert could be dejected or angry or sometimes maybe too resigned. And then one day he finally said, well, everybody has something, and this is what I have. And when he faced it with grace, as others here have shared this evening, he gave so many of us hope. And then on April 13, Robert died. There's another minister at the family's home here on the East Coast. The minister said, one definition of music is that it's organized sound and silence. Organized sound and silence. Well, we've heard a lot of music in various ways from Robert's life. But now has come the silence. And only then is the music of Robert's life complete in that silence. And we all need to face it. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens over time, doesn't it? And we all go through that, and we begin to hear further what the music of Robert's life was all about. And then it comes into fullness. But as we face that silence, we realize there are things that we just don't want to let go of. Doctor Who author Jamie Anderson said, I've come to realize that grief is love with nowhere to go. Grief is love with nowhere to go. When someone we love dies, a couple things happen. We know that we need to let go of them, but there are things that we don't want to let go of. We just don't. It's very difficult. Sometimes we're afraid that we're going to lose everything that they meant to us, that they're taking it with them to the great beyond through death. I don't think we need to worry about losing all of that. See, the things we love most about Robert, his intellect, his warmth, his care, his sense of humor, his love for Karen and so many, for young people, for music and magic and life. We're not going to lose that because Robert gave us that gift. Those things are a part of us. That's why we admire them. They're already given to us and they're part of us and we hold on to them. In my tradition, I kind of call that resurrection love. It's a love that's passed on, that stays with us. It's eternal, a resurrection love. And Robert loved the word sacerdotal. Sacerdotal. And we're going to share together a kind of sacerdotal magic. And I've been looking here at my notes, and now I'm going to come back at you. And could you make it so that you can see everybody? Can you put on your speaker view, or put on your gallery view, your Brady Bunch view? Everybody wave hi. Hi, good to see you. Good to see you. Tobias Beckwith, join us. Hi, Adam, David, Carol. Okay, so at the Magic and Mystery School, we say we're not just magicians up here, we're all magicians because we're all trying to transform our life. So we're going to be doing this sacerdotal magic together, and just do it in whatever way is meaningful to you. It's a certain connection of the divine within your religious tradition, fine. If you're more humanitarian, just think of it as connecting with love. All right. So, but we're going to have some fun first, and Robert would have loved this because it involves anatomy, and I just want to get us interacting together. So everybody go like this. Go ahead. Excellent. And go like this. Excellent. Go like this. And go back forth like that. One more time. Excellent. Now that's all because of the wonderful, miraculous thing of anatomical biological engineering. It's the wrist that enables us to do that. All right. So I'm going to back up here, and hopefully you can do this. Put your hand out like this. All right. So now, in order to turn the hand over, we turn the wrist like that, and it goes over, and then it comes back up. So make sure it's up. But what if you could do it magically without the wrist? Have your hand palm up, bring it up to you, up towards your face like this. Go down across your torso like this. Bring it out front of you like that. Now bring it back up again. Oh, things are changed. Look, the wrist hasn't bent. Bring it down again in front of you. The wrist didn't bend. And one more time out in front of you. Look at that. Everybody go like this. That's sign language for applause. Now we're going to do something that our one of our colleagues, one of the greatest mentalists in the world, Kenton Knepper, calls the anti-tada. A lot of magic, the magician gets up there, oh, how great am I, tada, and everybody applauds, right? But this is sacred. And so we're not going to applaud, and this is for you. If you applaud, then you're giving it to me. This is about you and your connection with Robert and whatever the beyond that source of love is for you, God, Buddha, whatever. All right? So here's what we're going to do. Take your hand, put out like this. Now I'd like you to envision, just pretend with me, play with me, that there are certain things hanging here in the air that are qualities of Robert that you love. And so for me, it's Robert's intellect and speaking. And put it in your hand. Go ahead, reach out, grab one. Robert's love for Karen. Put that in my hand. And just keep doing that until they're all going to be different for everybody. Just keep them, taking them, and taking them, and taking them. All right. And when you're done, just hold it there. All right. Now I want you to take them and then divide them in half. Now you see these here? Those are the things that Robert gave to you that stay in your life. Those things that are going to be part of you and that you pass on to everyone else that you love and care for in your life. And so I want you to take them, I want you to put them into your heart. And feel them there. Know that they're not going anywhere. And those are seeds that are planted and they are going to continue to grow. They're going to become part of you. And you know that Robert is there when those things come out of you. They'll become so much a part of you that it'll be like breathing. They'll be with you at every moment. These are the things we don't want to let go of. And so you can put me back in speaker mode. Keep holding these. And I want you to go like this and hold them. I'm about to do a piece of sacred magic, sacerdotal magic. And at the end, we'll lift these things up to the divine love, however you frame it. Okay, for Robert, it was Christ. All right. And it is to a piece of music that that Robert loved. And here are these words of St. Thomas Aquinas. O sacred banquet, we receive selfless, sacrificing love, where our minds are filled with grace, and a pledge of future glory to us is given. I'm just going to check my settings here to make sure that everything will go well. I got them. And it comes at the time of the Amen. I'll nod, and then we'll lift them up together. All right. Sacerdotal magic. Robert, we love you. You're on in 10 minutes. Eugene Berger will introduce you. The organ's heaven. And wait till you hear the choir.
And I'd like to end with a benediction from David Reed Brown.
I want to thank the Yale community. You have become very significant to the Magic and Mystery School. Not only did you, Karen, and Robert come through there, our own Eugene Berger went to Yale Divinity School. CJ May worked there. Jen Kramer, who came from our school through Yale Theater, is now on the Strip with her own show in Las Vegas. My seminary is now joined with Yale Divinity, and you've been a real blessing to our lives. So this benediction is from a French Huguenot pastor by the name of Jean-Henri Amiel in British Columbia, given to me by Dr. Marcus Borg. So friends, life is short. We do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who walk the way with us. So be swift to love, make haste to be kind. And may the one who creates us, redeems us, and sustains us abide with you this day and forevermore. And let all the people say, Amen. Live long and prosper.
Amen.